Assalamu alaikum. Hope you're all well. Starting a bit later than usual today. Let's see, who do we have in the chat? Okay, Assalamu alaikum, Adriana. Hope you're well. Tuka. Good to see you. And that's about it. All right, okay. Let's get this presentation underway. And Assalamu alaikum, Lens. Rider and Introvertical. And Beiku. These are new names I haven't seen before. So welcome to you. All right, let me get this presentation started. It's going to be a brief one today, just briefly something that actually just originated from me. It's something which Hassan al-Maliki brought up a number of times, and he's actually he started writing a book on this, or a booklet or something. But he never got to finish it. But he read us the beginning introduction of it, a while back when I was in Saudi. And basically, I've put in the description. It's sort of a follow-up, following on from my video, which I think was entitled "The Tale of Two Mosques and Two Prophets," where I mentioned. They had there were people within the early Muslim community while the Prophet was alive, all the way up till he passed away. There was a counter movement of people who were on basically a diametrically opposite path from the Prophet, right? So you had, the Prophet pushing towards taqwa, and these people were pushing towards the opposite. They were basically enemies of this change which the Prophet had brought. And this sort of follows on from that. Let me put on the screen. It's seen by looking at this word anat, which comes up in the Qur'an a few times. So just as we are in that video, I mentioned that you can think of there's the religion of taqwa, which is the religion of the Prophet, of the Qur'an, of God, and then there was the religion of the Masjid of Dirar, right? So there was the Masjid of Taqwa, and then there was the Masjid of Dirar, which is also mentioned in the Quran, the Masjid of harm, right? And we see a lot of harm coming from that side, right? From that side of some of the early communities, because just by their very nature, when you have the revelation come among a group of people, it polarizes. Okay, it polarizes. There are some that are drawn towards it. Okay, drawn towards the message, and it pulls them into it, makes them better than they are. And there are those by equal measure are repulsed by it or run away the opposite way, and they become even worse than they would be normally. So it makes people excel in either good or evil, right? And that's sort of one of the purposes of this world anyway. It's to put people through a test to see where you will go, which side, right? So this world doesn't let you sit on the fence so much. Anyway, so we mentioned here the religion of Anat, Deenul Anat, we can call it that way. Where does that come from? Because there's a lot of Anat in our deen, a lot of hardship in our religion. So the first thing I want to mention is that this verse here, right? One of the last few verses, last two verses in Surah Tawbah and Surah 9, where here it says, لَقَدْ جَاءَكُمْ رَسُولٌ مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ عَزِيزٌ عَلَيْهِ مَا عَنِتُّمْ. There has certainly come to you a messenger from among yourselves. Grievous to him is that you should suffer, or that you should be in hardship. right? Azizun alayhi ma anittum. It is grieve. It's a huge thing for him that you should be in difficulty, that you should be in hardship, that things should be difficult and strenuous and not easy, right? Azizun alayhi ma anittum, right? It grieves him that that should be your situation, right? Harisun alaykum. He is deeply concerned over you, right? Deeply concerned about you. Bil mu'minina ra'ufun rahim. Towards the faithful, those who have faith, those who have iman, he is very, very kind and very merciful. Okay, so this anat, which we find in the religion, something which the Prophet never wanted, of course, and which would grieve him when it came about, when he used to see it in his contemporaries. He would fight against it. He would push against it, right? And this is shown in this next verse, right? That it's more the default position of those who are around him, right? So this verse says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. This is in the verse actually which shows the default position. I labeled them wrong. Okay, this is the one that I'm talking about first. Okay, so it says, وَاعْلَمُوا أَنَّ فِيكُمْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ. Right? So this verse is saying, and know that among you is the messenger of Allah. Okay, know that among you is the messenger of Allah. This is addressing the people then, of course. Okay, he is among you. Okay, and then what does it say? لو يطيعكم في كثير من الأمر لعنتم. If he, the messenger, were to obey you, were to follow what you think is right, to do what you said, to obey what you say in much of the matter, you would be in anat. You would be in the state of anat, this hardship, this difficulty. Things would not be easy. Okay, and you would make things much more difficult on yourselves than need be, right? And that is something which he is not about, right? For him, it's azizun alayhi ma anittum. He doesn't want you to fall into this incredible hardship. Everything is difficult, confusing, you don't know what to do, and there are people on top of you who are giving you all of these extra rules, this, that, don't do this, don't do that, and making life difficult, right? He didn't want that at all, right? And the Qur'an is saying, be careful. He's saying that to the people then. Be careful. Among you is the messenger of Allah, right? If you badger him and tell him, why don't you do this? Why don't you do, and much of the matter, if you keep on asking and trying to make things, push in a certain way, and if he were to follow you, right, follow your wishes, your desires, your religion will be a hardship. Okay, you'd be in real hardship, real difficulty, right? As it says here, وَعَلَمُوا أَنَّ فِيكُمْ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ لَوْ يُطِيعُكُمْ فِي كَثِيرٍ مِنَ الْأَمْرِ لَعَنِتُّمْ. Okay, you'd be in hardship. And then the verse continues, وَلَكِنَّ اللَّهَ حَبَّبَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْإِيمَانَ وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. But rather, God has endeared faith, made you love faith. لَكِنَّ اللَّهَ حَبَّبَ إِلَيْكُمُ الْإِيمَانَ وَزَيَّنَهُ فِي قُلُوبِكُمْ. And he made it pleasing, or as like an adornment in your hearts. في قلوبكم وكره إليكم, and he made it displeasing and made you dislike الكفر والفسوق والعصيان. Kufr, ingratitude and fisq, so to go beyond the bounds. Fusuq is like to go beyond the bounds, defiantly go beyond the bounds in sins and things like this, and asyan, and disobedience. Okay, but the point about this is this tells you the default state about those around him. So what does that tell us would happen when the Messenger of Allah passed away? When the Messenger of Allah, so he's the one who's holding them back. Okay, he's the one who's holding them back from this headlong rush into anat, into hardship. Okay, he's the one who's stopping this. They're the ones who if they were given free reign, and if he were to follow them in what they desire, what they say, the Sahaba, we're talking about here, of course, those around him, then the deen, everything will become anat. It will become difficult. Okay, and they are being warned. They're being warned. Know that the Messenger of Allah is among you. Okay, so just follow his lead. Follow his lead, and be careful, because if he followed your lead, right? If he followed your lead, everything would be, you'd be in hardship. You'd be in trouble. Things would be difficult. So, of course, what does that mean when the Messenger of Allah was no longer there to hold back this anat? Okay, what would happen? Of course, we'd rush into it. Okay, the Ummah did rush into it. Things became more difficult, more difficult, more difficult. Hardships added to hardships, and very, very rarely do you find any pulling back from that. Okay, making things easier. That wasn't the case. I mean, if you'd have to learn, you'd have to look into history a lot, but you see that, okay, that generation after generation, right, decade after decade, things became more difficult, more strenuous, more things added to the religion, becomes bloated and more convoluted, right, until you get to a point where like now, right, some scholars try to teach you how to do wudu in 3 months. They tell you it takes you 3 months to learn how to wash for salah, right? I mean, it's ridiculous, okay? But anyway, so that's another point, okay? So the first point is that the Messenger of Allah, he was used to grieve him that we, the Ummah, his people, should go into anat. The second point is that the people around him were people who pushed towards this more. Okay, and the third point is this one, which is there's another group among them. So it says here, warning the faithful. Okay, so it says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, or you who have faith. Okay, لا تتخذوا بطانة من دونكم. Okay, لا يألونكم خبالا ودوا ما عنتم. Or you have faith, do not take as intimates those other than yourselves. Okay, what I mean, it's not a good translation. It doesn't mean just, it means like, it doesn't mean those other than yourselves and anybody else. No, it's not. It's talking about a bitana. What is bitana? Bitana are like a group, sort of like a coalesced group. Okay, there's a coalesced group, which are not of you, okay, but you try to take them as allies and look to them in a certain way. But what does God describe about these? So there's a bitana. The point is that in the society of Medina, okay, this is a Medina verse. In the society of Medina, there's a bitana. There's a group of people. There's a group of people, okay, other than the faithful, who, sorry about that noise, by the way, who are described here. How are they described? Okay, how are they described? For they will not spare you any ruin. Okay, لا يألونكم خبالا. So they would not care if any ruin would befall you, and they wish that you would go into the state of anat. They wish hardship on you. وَدُّوا مَا عَنِتُّمْ. Right? So just as the Prophet, it was azizun alayhi ma anittum, it was difficult, grievous upon him that you should be in anat, that you should go into hardship. Azizun alayhi ma anittum. These people, waddu ma anittum. They would love that you should go into hardship. They would love that you should go in. And these people who would love that you should go into hardship, some of the faithful, some of the people around the Prophet, some of the Muslims, the Sahaba, they were friendly with them. Okay, they were taking them as allies, listening to them. And we have the other verse, which is talking about, these are like the hypocrites, right? Another verse which is talking about them listening to the hypocrites earnestly. وَفِيكُمْ سَمَّاعُونَ لَهُمْ. Okay, among you, believers are those who listen earnestly to the hypocrites. Okay, because of course the hypocrites were people who had wealth. They were, in good bodies and good health. They were like, in positions of prestige. Okay. وَدُّوا مَا عَنِتُّمْ, and more description about it. So that's one thing. قَدْ بَدَتِ الْبَغْضَاءُ مِنْ أَفْوَاهِهِمْ. Okay. Hatred has already appeared from their mouths. Right. So these people, hatred towards you has already appeared from their mouths. So why are you taking them as friends, as becoming close to them, as intimate? لا تتخذوا بطانة من دونكم. Don't take these people as sort of consorts or allies. So they've already shown from their mouths, from their lips, hatred towards you. Okay, and then God tells us, وَمَا تُخْفِي صُدُورُهُمْ أَكْبَرُ. And what they conceal in their hearts, the hatred that they have for you, that they conceal in their hearts, is even greater. Okay, even greater. Okay, so these are people that were mixed in with the early community, right? They were people who were mixed in with the early Muslim community, and there was this faction of people that themselves really had hatred and detest towards the Prophet and those around him, and they wanted them to go into hardship. Okay, so we have this force of people, this section of people who are not of the faithful, right? Who want this hardship towards the believers. And at the same time, there's among the Sahaba those who themselves, if the Prophet were to listen to them, okay, in much of the affair, they would lead us to hardship. So after the Prophet passed away, there were these two forces that were still there, okay? And there was really nobody there to rein that in, to hold that in check, okay? And so what happened, of course, our religion went from hardship to hardship. And, I have people, sometimes messaging me, tell me, why is Islam so difficult? Or, why is it so difficult to understand the Qur'an? Why is this? And it isn't, okay? It's this huge, convoluted bloatedness that has come and has its origins from this early stage of our history. Okay, we had these elements early on, okay, and we didn't differentiate them. Okay, we didn't differentiate them, and the scholars later on came and did what they could, and some of them had their own biases and etc. But that just became part of our religion. So I'll put here just a few examples of this. So, for example, during the Prophet's time, the men and women used to pray in the same place, right? In exactly the same place. The masjid just had the rows of men and rows of women. The women would be behind, and the men would be in front, but they would be in the same place. They would all pray together. Nowadays, in most places, the women are walled off completely in a completely separate place, right? A woman who goes into a mosque in the middle of the salah, she won't know which part, where the imam is in the salah, right? You wouldn't know unless there are people who have been there from the beginning, and then sort of where they are. But a lot of times it happens where the imam is in sujood and the women are standing, and it's not, why? It's anat. Okay, it's just extra hardship. It wasn't there. In the Prophet's time, people used to do wudu from the same basin, right? The men and women used to make wudu from the same basin, hold, right? And then later on, it was Umar ibn Khattab who separated. He stopped that. He said, no, now men do wudu in their own hold over here, and the women over there. And he separated that, right? And he would walk around with the whip and hit people up there, and that became part of our anat as well. So now we had the religious police in Saudi Arabia, and recently they'd walk around beating people, right? Because that became part of our sunnah of our caliphs, right? Umar al-Khattab used to do that, so people took that up and as if it's a good thing, as if the Prophet used to walk around with a whip hitting people when they didn't do something right. Other things, for example, mut'a marriage, right? So everybody agrees that during the Prophet's time, mut'a marriage was allowed, and then later on it was disallowed by Umar ibn Khattab, right? And he also disallowed the mut'a of Hajj. So there was Hajj. There's different types of Hajj, and he disallowed that as well. Okay, so that made more hardships. The Taraweeh Salah, right, in Ramadan. Okay, this has become a hardship for a lot of people now, right? There are some people that think that in some places in the world, they think that, it's just something has to be done. I know that there's places, for example, in Pakistan where they will do something very strange because they think it's a necessary part of Ramadan, right? And so they will, and they've intertwined that with the idea that the purpose of the Taraweeh is to finish the Qur'an. So what they would do, some mosques, they would spend the first 3 nights, literally the whole night in salah, to speed reading through the Quran. So then they don't have to do it for the rest of the month. So you've got these weird ideas, right? So that came about. That wasn't in the Prophet's time, right? The Prophet used to do Taraweeh in the mosques at all. It was started later on by Umar ibn Khattab. Much later on, when Ali became caliph, he tried to discourage it, but people started to shout, "Oh Umar, oh Umar, oh," for a legacy of Umar. So he just he left them. There were more important things to do then. The rules to fix your salah, right? So if you learn fiqh, it's completely convoluted, especially the Maliki fiqh, which I learned, completely convoluted, right? If you do something extra in your salah, or you miss something a little bit, or you forget to recite the surah, or you don't remember how many sajdas you did, or how many, and all rules for when you should do the two prostrations before the salam or after the salam, or you should do the tashahhud or not do the tashahhud. Complicated rules to fixing your salah. Okay, that's anit. Okay, and I mentioned this already. But the wudu now, you can find you have a whole book, thick volume, thicker than the Qur'an, to teach you how to do wudu, right? All the rules for wudu and what breaks the wudu and what all of this, right? And wudu in the Quran is just one verse. Okay, that's anit, right? This is all hardship, right? Strict rules for joining your prayers and or shortening them, right? So then now you have these there are some of the madhahib, for example, they do not allow you to join your prayers, right? To put them together. And so they find workarounds, right? Where they decide, okay, then so we pray Dhuhr right at the end of its time, and then right after it, just before the time of Asr comes, we pray Dhuhr, and then wait a little bit, and then we can pray Asr, and then we haven't joined, but yeah, it's like we've joined. All that hardship for no reason. Okay, the obsession over women's hijab. I mean, that's a huge thing. I mean, that's one of the things that is just a constant thing for women to have to deal with. Women who are trying to be religious, right, who are trying to follow the deen, and it's just always going to be an issue from the moment if they're converts. From the moment that they convert, it's always this big thing. Oh, when are you going to cover? If you're going to cover, and it's just obsessive over it, right? When a new Muslim, right, somebody becomes Muslim and they're told they've got 3 days to learn how to pray, right? Doesn't matter, if you're old or young, you could be a Japanese person who's been a Buddhist all your life, and you convert to Islam at age 81, and you're told no, you've got like 3 days or however long to learn how to pray, and now you have to pray this way, right? You have to pray the traditional Muslim salah using Arabic words, which you'll struggle over, and your exemplary maybe meditation and thing that you've done all of your life in your own religious practice, that all of that is just thrown to the wayside. Okay, that's on it. It's a difficulty. Abrogation, right? That the Quran has been abrogated, and this verse has abrogated this, or even that the Sunnah has abrogated the Quran. All of these create more and more anat, and there's so much trouble that comes from it, right? The amount of trouble you can have to try to convince a fanatic extremist to follow the Quran, and he responds back to you by saying, "Oh, that verse is abrogated; it's no longer effect," and we ignore it. "Oh, that verse is abrogated. That verse is abrogated." Anat, right? Hardship. The issues of inheritance between Muslims and non-Muslims, right? If in the same family, right? So you could be a person who's converted to Islam, and you don't get to inherit from your parents, right? So your parents die, or your family member or somebody, and you're not allowed to inherit anything. Why? That's not in the Quran, right? Or you have your you have your you're a Muslim, and your one of your children decides to leave Islam. Now, no, sorry, he or she is not going to be allowed to inherit anything. It creates incredible strife between such family members, right? So again, Hanat, in all of these things, and all of these things have come later, right? All of these things are things that the Prophet would have held back, right? He wouldn't have allowed. Even actually, I was speaking today on Twitter. I was just saying about, because of course, the whole issue of Gaza and stuff, and what's happening in Palestine now. So there was this video of a Christian preacher in the USA talking about Islam is evil, it's a devil cult, etc., etc., and that Netanyahu should flatten all of Gaza, and then finally destroy the Masjid al-Aqsa, right? Destroy the Masjid al-Aqsa and have the third temple, so that the third temple would be built, so that Jesus will come back and start the kingdom of heaven. It's part of their beliefs. And I was saying, look, my view is, let them have Aqsa, right? Let either the Jews or the Christian, let the Jews have Aqsa and rebuilt it. In the end, when they rebuild it as a Jewish temple, it's a masjid for us, right? In the Qur'an, the first temple, the second temple, they're all called masjid. They are masajid. They're places for salah, right? It's not, the third temple, when or if it gets built, is in the end still Masjid al-Aqsa, right? And if by letting them do that, you can show them that it's, because I don't believe, of course, that there's Isa's coming back or that the Messiah is coming back. But so if the third temple is allowed to be built, and when that is shown that that's not going to happen, that doesn't happen, it can so it will be a wake up call for some of the people who are supporting the brutality of Israel out of a sense of religious duty, that this needs to happen to fulfill prophecy and all of that. Okay, so you just give to them. So it's not an issue. But in the end, of course, people are they're pretty fanatical over the whole issue of Al-Aqsa. But the whole issue shouldn't even have been there. I mean, why did the early Muslims, decide to build a mosque there anyway? It was Masjid al-Aqsa before the mosque was there, right? And it's one of the things which I mentioned. If the Prophet had been alive at the time, he would have had the respect and esteem for his brethren among the prophets, the Israelite prophets, the numerous Israelite prophets. He would have had the third temple rebuilt. He would have had it rebuilt for Ahlul Kitab, for them, and for his brethren among the prophets, right? But that's another anat that's come about, right? This headlong rush, whereby the Prophet hold those things in check. We have that as well. Anyway, so that's all I have to say. Let's see, do I have anybody backstage to listen? Come on. Nope, nobody here yet. All right. So if anybody's new here, just remember, if you want to come on, the link should be pinned in the comments. Feel free to hop on. Remember, everybody, please, again, that the purpose of these streams is to have anybody come on and share any insights they might have, any contemplation they've had over any verses, anything they like, really. So feel free to do so. Let me have a look through the comments while I wait. If nobody comes on in around like 10-15 minutes, then we'll call it a night. Okay, let's see. I hate Hamas. Well, Hamas is not it's probably not the best of examples, but there's a lot of disinformation about them as well. But one thing for sure is that they are resisting. They are a resistance force. you think the hadith about 99 murder is is BS? Yes, I do. That's absolute nonsense. I think I mentioned it in the video about the follow-up to Surah Ad-Din. So I've got a couple of video lectures, and I mentioned it in that surah. Of course, yeah, it's absolutely nonsense. It's made for tyrants to say that a tyrant could kill as many people as he likes, and eventually he just gets forgiven for just wanting to be forgiven, right? That he kills 99 people, and he asks some righteous person, "Can I be forgiven?" The person says no. He kills him as well, so that's 100, right? And then he goes to somebody else, "Can I be forgiven?" Say, "Yeah, go to this other city over there, and you can be forgiven." And on the way, he gets, he dies, and then God makes the place that he's going to come closer. They say go further, and no, it's all nonsense. And the Quran says that somebody who kills one person intentionally, one person enjoying safety, right, intentionally, then it's hell for him forever, and that's it. And there's no verse which is given in a harsher way in the Quran in that verse. So yes, that's nonsense. It takes a lot to kill somebody. I mean, you have to. It's not an easy low to sink to. Okay, that's not for me. God doesn't burden us all. Wait till we can. That's right. Let me go back up and see if there's anything I should comment on. Yes, exactly. Another clear example of that is as soon as he passed away, Fatima was disinherited. But that has a lot to do with the politics as well, right? That had to do with the politics. Abu Bakr obviously didn't get that hadith from the Prophet. He got it from somebody else, it would seem, unless you want to say he was one who made it up, which isn't, something that has to be ruled out automatically. But I think he got it from somebody else. Because Abu Bakr, he was very, towards the end of the Prophet's life, when Quraysh became Muslim, he suddenly started, being very admiring of Abu Sufyan and the leaders of Quraysh and these sort of things, because that was the Arab mentality. And the Arab mentality is the chiefs are chiefs, the leaders are leaders, right? So by when they became Muslim, it was like they restored to their old position for a lot of Arabs. Okay, that they would see them that way, whereas that wasn't the way it should be seen. Okay, but that's how he had. So he was viewing Abu Sufyan as the leader of Quraysh and the great, that sort of stuff. So and of course it's them who wanted Fatima to be disinherited, because of the support that would give for Ali and his. Of course, he was opposing the caliphate in the beginning, the early caliphate, right? He was in opposition to that. So there was some politics about that, but yeah, that's a very clear indication right at the beginning. No sooner does the Prophet pass away, then the Quran is thrown on the side for the sake of a hadith, right? Very clear one there. Injunction about murder. Given a strict injunction about murder, how do we reconcile it with the fact that Musa killed the Egyptian? Yeah, I mean, Musa at this time, he wasn't a prophet, and this was one of his sins, right? It was one of his sins that he killed somebody, but he didn't kill the person deliberately, right? So he hit him, and and it was like, what would you call it now? Manslaughter, right? Manslaughter when there's no deliberate intent, right? There's first degree murder, second degree murder, third degree murder, right? If you cause somebody's death even by accident, it's still considered a murder, just called third degree murder or something like that. So Musa didn't intentionally kill him. So, it was not. And then, of course, the Quran mentions that that whoever kills somebody by mistake, and there's penance for that. But there's no penance for the deliberate murder of somebody. You deliberately murder somebody. When the Prophet died, what actually happened to the good companions? Well, they were sort of like sidelined. They were there, but they were more sidelined, right? You had many who were, but it was like in the beginning, the early companions of the Prophet, they were all the poor and the downtrodden, right? You had Bilal, you had Suhaib al-Rumi, you had Salman al-Farisi, al-Miqdad, you had Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, there were many, right? And there were many that we don't know their names because their seerah was lost, okay? Because they didn't have, because again, what happened later, don't forget, what happens later, we decided who got to narrate and who do we know about and who we don't know about, there were many of the people who emigrated to Abyssinia, to Al-Habasha, in the very first emigration. Many of them died very, very late. Okay, but we don't know then. We don't know hardly anything about them. We don't know their names, most of them, right? There were huge many. So a lot of it is a failing of the narrators. So we don't know much about them. The Prophet had many freed slaves, right? There were slaves that he bought and he freed them, and who used to be close to him, right? And we don't get to hear anything about them, right? We only hear about Anas bin Malik, right? That's the only one you hear about, who was who used to serve the Prophet, and that's because he was close to the authorities later. You have to understand that there was each generation, okay, who narrated and who gained a hearing, who people listened to, depended on their situation, their position. Okay, compare, for example, this is something that I'll try to mention in the next video that I'm doing, the reaction videos. For example, Abu Huraira, right? Abu Huraira, everybody knows how much narrations he's narrated. Okay, there's Abu Huraira, and then there's Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas. Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, who was one of the early Muslims to early converts. Okay, he was with the Prophet in the whole of the Mecca period, and he's even related to the Prophet through his mother. Okay, and he was even a general after the Prophet passed away. He was a general in the Muslim army. He was one of the 6 that could have been caliph, the third caliph, right? He wasn't a small person. He was a very important figure, right? Very close to the Prophet. He heard numerous hadiths, all of that, okay? Compared to Abu Huraira, who became Muslim very late, and he came to Medina like in the last 3 years of the Prophet's life. Now, both of these, they lived in Medina and they died in the same year. Okay, they lived in Medina and they died in the same year. So they had the same people around them, the same people who were trying to get narrations. The next generation who wanted to hear reports, hear the hadiths, the same people. But Abu Huraira ends up narrating almost like 4,000 hadiths or something, right? A huge amount in the Sahih collections. Whereas Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas, his total hadiths are like 150 or something. Why is that? Well, it's because because of a difference in how they were treated by the authorities. Okay, just like now in any of the Gulf countries, there are scholars who are famous and everybody hears them because they are given the pulpit, they are given the minbar, the you know the authorities are pleased with them. They give them that thing, and so people naturally they will listen to the official outlets, just like the mainstream media before the internet age. The mainstream media, that's what everybody hears. That's what you hear. You hear the newspapers, the spokesperson. This is what you hear. You don't hear the people who have been sidelined by the authorities. You don't hear them. Okay, they're elsewhere. And Sa'd ibn Abi Waqqas was like that. He was sidelined by Muawiyah, and there's suspicions that he was poisoned by him. Whereas Abu Huraira, he was made the governor of Medina. He was a governor of Medina. He was made that by Muawiyah because of his stance against Ali, right? So because of that, he gained that. And then if you look at the next generation of narrators, you find that Abu Huraira's chief narrators are also people who are close to the authorities, right? And you find that of each of those who narrated a lot of hadiths. So you find that the people who narrated over 1,000 hadiths in the Sahih collections, they are all people who either themselves or their students were with the authorities, Whereas other people, you don't hear about them. Hassan al-Malik likes to give the example of what's his name, Midlaj as-Sulami, I think his name was. He was one of he was a Sahabi who was early Sahabi, who was in the Battle of Badr, Uhud, all of the battles, right? But we only hear about him, and we only knew and the only person who discovered that he was actually a Sahabi was Ibn Hajar in the 7th century. He discovered this, and he was, and we only knew about it because he was in the massacre of the Prophet's family at Karbala, right? So there's a lot of Sahaba. The majority of them, we don't know anything about them. Okay, we don't know anything about them. We know about those who were allowed to be sort of like to flourish. And then of course later on we get a lot of dogmatism, which clouded who is given more esteem, right? So people learn about certain Sahaba and they don't learn about others, even those who are who could be well documented. They're sort of like ignored. Okay, Abu Dharr, for example, one of the greatest Sahaba, amazing man. But he was sidelined, right? And he's made to seem like he was a fool and an imbecile, right? That wasn't the case. Yeah, he wasn't a fool or an imbecile somebody who was not world wise or any of that. Anyway, digressing there. And how was this? In the story of the Prophet Sulaiman, wasn't he forcing the Queen of Sheba and her people to accept Islam using the threat of invasion? Yeah, I haven't really thought about that story much because I don't really understand the whole the palace and the palace, the floor made of crystal and she thinks it's water, and I don't get it. I don't get exactly what was happening in that, but so I don't know the context of it very well. Maybe I need to actually spend some time actually looking into that because, but yeah, it looks like, what was it? He was a king and he was like, come to me, and la ta'lu alayhi wa atuni muslimin, and then she sends a present, sort of like refusing to come to him. But when he says come to me, does it mean he used to come to me like as an invitation, and then maybe the generals were like, let's get an army ready just in case. So I don't know about that. And yeah, I mean, we have to remember also that prophets are not God. They're not avatars of God or anything like that. Yeah, the Battle of Siffin. Obviously, it was Ali who was in the right, and Muawiyah who was just being a rebel. One of the big tragedies, and and if the people who were with Ali had just stood behind him properly, things could have ended up much more different. When somebody from the West, comes with the argument that Islam is inherently oppressive to women, it goes back to a hadith from Abu Hurairah. Yeah, that's true. Abu Hurairah was, a lot of that comes down to him, and a lot of the hadith which showed a prophet in a bad light in his private affairs. They go back to Urwa. I mean, the Shia would blame it on Aisha, but the blame seems to fall mostly on Urwa. They go back to Urwa, her nephew. Is that news by Sheikh al-Maliki? No, unfortunately, no new news. His son was released. He has been released now for a while. I didn't actually catch that news when it came out, but I think maybe he wanted it to be quiet. Yeah. Abu Hurairah struck Ka'b al-Ahmar with the I mean, he had a lot of altercations. Abu Dhar, sorry. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I need to look into Suleiman. Maybe I'll do a stream about that. Abu Dhar was the Sahaba who would not sit reciting the Quran during the night. Before Surah Muzammil was revealed, he was so steadfast. Allah wrote him. He was incredibly steadfast, yes. Another key example that proves we have been misguided post the Prophet's passing is the fact we are never taught the first Medina constitution that was codified during the Prophet's leadership. Yes, that's another glaring thing. I mean, a lot of things we aren't taught about it, right? The Prophet actually had numerous agreements. He made numerous agreements with practically everybody around him, right? Everybody around him, he made agreements with them. Even when they did the march Tabuk, which there was no actual battle. We call it the Battle of Tabuk, even though in Arabic, Ghazwa Tabuk, even though there was no Ghazwa, there was no. The Prophet marched north because of the rumors of what was happening, and found there was nothing, and he came back. But while he was up there, he made peace agreements with them. I've actually speculating here, but I'm wondering if somebody were to collate all of the treaties, the peace treaties the Prophet made, I'm guessing it'd be very high up compared to anybody, during his, well, not during his time, but during that time period, 300 years before or 300 years after. I doubt anybody did more peace treaties than he did, signed and sought and made more treaties than he did. He made a huge number of peace treaties. One of them was made by, I've mentioned this before, to the ruler of Egypt, and he had the document with him. It was, he had it signed by the Prophet, and then later, after the Prophet passed away, when the Muslims were conquering, and Amr ibn al-As wanted to conquer Egypt for himself, really, for his own greed. the ruler of Egypt sent him the Prophet's agreement, which was that there exists a peace between us and that we will not attack you. And Amr al-As just ripped it up. He just ripped it up, literally just ripped up the agreement. Is there any peace treaty confirmed in the Prophet's time? Well, there are lots which have been narrated. I mean, the actual documents, there are fragments floating around, but there are copies of copies. I actually had a video on this channel, which I had to remove because of the copyright strike. I need to re-upload it into the archive YouTube channel that I have to go over this. There was one which is called the Achima of Muhammad. So the covenant of the Prophet Muhammad with the monks of Saint Catherine. It's usually called the Achima, something like an Achima of Muhammad. Let me just search it up. It's called Covenant of the Prophet with monks of the Mount. Yeah, the Ashtima, something like that, of Muhammad. I'll put it in the thing. This is very well attested, incredibly well attested, and I did a video on it, just having it being read. I need to re-upload that. Let me put that into the chat. So if you want to have a look at that, you can. There's a book which was done by Dr. Morrow, I forget his name exactly. But he had this thing where he got about 5 or 6 of the best attested ones into one book, showing the agreements that the Prophet made with a number of people. So this one was made to the monks of Saint Catherine's. It's called the place, the monks in a covenant in the mountains, and a monastery. And it's really directed to all Christians as well. So it's addressed to them, but it's for all Christians. It's an amazing read. Highly recommend you have a look at it. And there are a few other ones as well. Well, this I wouldn't say that this was. It was Umar's fault in the end for not controlling Amr, but the one who did this was Amr ibn al-As. The story goes that when Umar ibn Khattab heard that Amr was getting ready to go to invade Egypt, he sent a messenger with a letter telling him not to, if he hadn't started already, to not to, of course, right? And Amr ibn al-As was very clever. He was like a political genius, like Muawiyah. He got the letter before he entered Egypt, but he said, "I'm not going to open it until after I've gone in," because he knew that what the letter would say, that if the letter was going to say, "Don't go in," it would only be the condition would be if you have not already gone in. But if you've gone in, just continue, because we already started a battle, sort of the war conquering. Okay, just finish it, right? So that's basically what the letter said. And so he went in and he started, and then he opened the letter, and it says, if you haven't already entered Egypt, then stop. If you have, then continue with it. But in the end, it's under Umar's watch, and he was the caliph at the time, right? And that's why you have to be careful of all of these stories, which overgrandize some of the caliphs, right? Like his saying that, I'm afraid that if if a goat slips on the banks of the Euphrates, I would be questioned about it on the Day of Judgment, right? So you have these sort of overly pious statements from some of the caliphs sometimes, where it seems, you have these in these biographies about them, showing them to be, amazing, but if you look at actually the things which actually happened, not these little anecdotal stories which could just be made up, they show a different. They don't show that picture. Okay, they don't show that picture. And this idea that Umar al-Khattab was worried if a goat slipped and hurt itself, that he would be questioned about it on the Day of Judgment, while he was, walking around with a whip hitting people, and wasn't he afraid that he'd be questioned about that? No, I mean, you have to be careful about those. There's a lot of over-aggrandizing. Umar al-Khattab, though, he was excellent in generally very excellent in managing people, right? So he kept a firm hold on most of the people who were in charge of the provinces, right? So he was good at that, and he instilled fear in them, so at least they didn't do what they would later do during Uthman's time. Anyway, the history. I need to actually. The history is important, but once you've sort of like gone through it and sort of like have the general idea of how things were, it becomes tedious trying to keep all of the, keep it all in your mind and learn it all, and why? I mean, it's kind of depressing at times. But it shows it helps you to see how things came to be the way they were. It does help you. And there are some people that you can't unravel for them the inherited Islam, as I like to call it, from the Qur'anic Islam, without showing them what happened historically, right? Because they don't have enough confidence in themselves and in the Qur'an, right? They always think, oh, the people before knew better. The people before were better than us. I have to follow them. I have to listen to what they're saying, right? And you have to sort of sometimes shine a light on that to say, look, trust yourself more, because these weren't these absolutely great, astonishing people. It wasn't like that. Okay, have a bit more faith in your own ability to understand guidance, to be able to just take guidance from the Quran, which is what it's there for. Yeah, that's right. I mean, history is written for the victors, right? There's that saying that history is written by the victors, and that's in many ways that's true. But it isn't just written by the victors. The victors sometimes don't even have to write the history, right? But people around the victors will write the history for them. So whether they write it themselves or those around it, history is always written for the victors, right? To make them seem better. All right. Okay, I think we'll close it there. Didn't have anybody coming on backstage, so let's end it there. And inshallah, be able to speak to you all again a couple of weeks from now. And until then, hope you're well and stay safe, and keep your prayers for the people in Palestine and also in Congo and in Sudan, and there are other places, of course, where some real tragedies are happening. But of course, Gaza is taking up all the spotlights, but there are other places as well. There's a lot happening in other places as well. A lot of injustices happening around the world there as well. Okay, Assalamu alaikum. Take care of yourselves and see you next time.